Hi, welcome to the Jansen Art Studio. I'm David Jansen. Welcome to Paint It Simply. What we're going to do for the next couple of hours, we're going to break this DVD up into a couple of sections, and what I'm going to do is explain to you how the Paint It Simply colors work, because we're going to start out with 6, and then later on in advanced lessons you can expand to 14, and we'll explain why going to 14. But first, just a real quick little introduction about my history. I've been painting for 35 years. I started out in oils, and I painted with oils for about 10 years, and then I moved over to acrylics. And I never really liked the acrylics as much until we started coming out with the newer generation acrylics, or the first generation. Let's call it the first generation acrylics, the Josania colors. And when we did those back in 1983, they were quite a bit of an advancement over the bottled colors. And it's not that bottled colors are bad. Bottle colors have their uses in our industry. I've written a lot of books and DVDs with them, and likewise with the first generation acrylics, I've written a lot of books and DVDs with those. But they're limited as to what they can do compared to the new generation acrylics that we have here with the Heritage Multimedium. They can still do stuff. As a matter of fact, I wrote a book way back in 1986, which with my mother, that we used 5 colors and painted all these beautiful things. So they can do very nice things as those first generation acrylics can, and they're still marvelous things. But can they do as much as we do today? Not as much, but it depends on where you're going to go with your education. For me, it has been a 30-year journey trying to find acrylics that can work and give me the look that I have enjoyed for so many years with the oils. Now I completely, totally have that. So I no longer use any of the bottle acrylics. I use artist grade quality acrylics, which is the Heritage Multimedium, which is a paint line that we developed here. After all these years, I've developed 4 different types of paint lines for different paint companies, and this one is going to be my swan song. This is the last one I ever do, because I can't think of anything else that I really want to be able to do that this paint system can't do. So what we started to do about 2 years ago is we started to move back to basic coloring and basic artistic techniques. What happened, I think, in our industry is we grew too big. We grew every time we wanted to do something new, we needed to create another bottle of color. And soon we have some companies with 400 bottles of color. And we've taken away some of the color theory and some of the knowledge that artists use to paint. That's kind of like driving a car and not knowing what pedals do what on the floor of the car. You don't know. And if you don't know, then you can't do beautiful things. Certainly, you can put a color here, put a color there, put a color here, and side load and float a color and everything like that. But after a while, that's just going to get boring, and you're not going to find the creative satisfaction that we have as artists. So what we do is we're going to go back and we're going to add a little bit of color theory. You don't need to be study color theory for years to paint this. The whole program's called Paint It Simply. We keep everything simple. And, we learned about the color wheel, the 12-color wheel, in grade school. We learned that you had primary colors of a red, yellow, and blue. And those primary colors make just about everything. And that's basically what we're going to go back to. And so what we're going to do is we're going to follow some of the techniques of some of the great masters like Rembrandt, who painted with 5 colors, Vermeer, who used 7. And, you look at those Dutch painters back there in the Golden Age, there was only, 17 to 21 in a period of 100 years, 17 to 21 pigments in existence during that time. So they didn't have a whole lot that they can choose from, but they limited their palettes anyway because they get a better harmony, and that's what we're going to show you. The Paint It Simply program, the first part of it, there's 2 palettes in the Paint It Simply program. There is what we call the 6-color beginning palette, which is what I'm going to tell you about right now. Then there's the 14-color advanced palette, like I said. The 6-color beginning palette starts out with a couple of colors that we use quite a bit of, which is your black and your white. Now, in the actual lessons, and when we follow some of our techniques as we move up into the 19th century type of techniques called alla prima Premier Coup, those particular techniques, you'll see me use less and less and less black, because painters during the 19th century, early 20th century, as you went into the Impressionistic movement, they used less and less black. But as decorative painters, we use black. We use quite a bit of black. So in the program, you'll hear me reference back and forth as sometimes using black, sometimes not using black. And that is depending upon the artist and the technique. But in the program, we'll add it because there are some things, and a lot of people need to have that black, and a lot of people need to have that particular white out there. So we'll have those. So we have a black and a white, basically to make our colors darker, to make our colors lighter. What we call shade colors, what we call tint colors, lighter colors, tint colors. You have your yellow. Now, one of the things that when you go pick a yellow, you want a nice bright yellow. This is Hansa yellow. This is what we call pigment yellow 74, which is its chemical index name. Pigment yellow 74 is a popular color being used by just about every paint company out there to make a real powerful, almost a primary type yellow. It is just a little off spectrum, but for what we want, it works particularly well. And what I mean by spectrum is if you took light and if you broke light up into like a rainbow, the colors that you see in the rainbow, that's your light, that's your spectrum. We call spectrum colors. So yeah, it's real close, and it'll give us exactly, pretty much what we need. It's way brighter than what I do on a lot of paintings. We'll get into that and we'll explain that. But Hansa yellow is a very, very important color. Some companies will call it like a lemon yellow. Some people call it like a yellow light. Okay, there'll be some things in it. But this one is a pure color. You'll see down here on its pigment number, it will have just one pigment on there, Pig Y74. Doesn't have any white or anything else in it, so it's a nice, clear, beautiful color. Phthalo blue, very powerful, not as old as some of the other blues that you have in the industry. In the industry, you have an ultramarine blue, which we will add in the 14 color palette. That is one of your oldest blues. Watercolors like a cerulean blue. Phthalo blue, or what we call phthalocyanine blue, is a very, very powerful blue. It's pigment blue 15.3. And what this blue does is it's been used a lot in paint companies in the last 40 to 50 years because of how much more powerful it is, and it's not very expensive as far as a pigment. So it gives you a very good blue. It leans a little bit to the yellow side, or what we call the green side of the blue. So it's a blue leaning green, but it's actually leaning towards the yellow side. It gives you, in conjunction with the right red, it'll give you beautiful violets. But with the wrong red, it won't give you as much. It won't give you very nice violets at all because it's got a little green in it. We'll explain that. So we have a very, very powerful blue. Your oldest blue is ultramarine blue. And one reason why I don't use ultramarine blue is a beautiful blue. We have it on the 14 color palette. But phthalo blue is a much better mixing blue for you in the beginning part of this program. And I have hundreds and hundreds of beautiful paintings in violets and so on that you can do very nicely with the phthalo. And the phthalo blue will be a nice blue for you to learn how to control. If you can control phthalo blue, you can easily control ultramarine blue. So it's best if we're going to learn how to do it. Let's learn how to control phthalo. Then we have two reds. Now, normally in a primary, like when I've written a book before and I did 5 colors, I use basically these particular colors. I used ultramarine blue instead of phthalo blue, but I use basically these particular colors. This red right here, very nice red. It is not really a true red. It is a red-orange. It leans slightly to the yellow side or the orange side. Okay, so it's not particularly a spectrum, what we call spectrum red. It's not a Christmas red. Okay, we can make it Christmas red real easy. But it gives beautiful oranges, and the one reason why I do have it in the line, it is very, very warm. Okay, one of the things that we're going to be painting and Painted Simply more than anything else is how we are going to paint temperature. In a lot of decorative painting situations, we don't paint a lot of temperature. But in every other style of painting that we have, every other genre that's out there, they do a lot of temperature. So one of the things that Painted Simply is going to be keying on, one key factor of color, is temperature. And temperature is difficult to see. It's difficult for artists to see. So we are going to break it down where you can paint it without even seeing it. And I'm going to show you that as we progress through this particular video. So we have this red here. It's a beautiful red. It's a red orange, very powerful, but its main thing is it's very, very warm. So it'll be our warming color that we have on our pigment. Temperature wise, you have a blue and a yellow here, and a lot of people think that blue is cool. That's not true. Okay, blue sits on the cool side of the spectrum of light is blue. But when we're talking about pigments, and especially like when you talk about ultramarine blue, a lot of artists will say, cool it down with some ultramarine blue. There's not a paint company in the world that makes a cool ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue, the pigment itself is warm. But in a lot of other painting situations that you put colors into, ultramarine blue is going to look cool compared to like a naphtha red light. This particular color here is on fire. I mean, it is really, really warm. But an ultramarine blue will look cooler compared to it. But is it a cool pigment? No, it's a warm pigment. And in certain painting situations, those temperatures are going to make a difference. And so as we go through the program, you'll slowly learn how to do a little bit more and a little bit more. And the key feature of this program is to paint anything, you only have to learn 14 colors. And for your first few years, all you're going to really use is 6. And I've used these 6. I'm going to be doing a painting later on this month using the 14 again. But basically, all last year, I painted 450 paintings with 6 colors. That's all I used all year long. In all of my seminars, in all of my books, my DVDs, I wrote 8 books using nothing but 6 colors. It's a fantastic way to paint. So you really don't need all of these colors, as long as you have a little bit of color knowledge, and that's what we're going to use. So we have temperature. Hansa yellow is a neutral. It's a lot of people think your yellows and your oranges, you take that color wheel, you divide it in half, your yellows and your oranges are warm. That's not necessarily so. Some of them are more towards a neutral, like a lukewarm. They're like a barely a tepid glass of water. They don't really have it warm, not really cool. It's just kind of there. And we'll learn more about that. But along comes our friend to the cool side is this one. And this is one reason why I have 6 colors to start out the beginning part of our painting here. This is the red violet pigment, PV19, pigment violet 19. Now this is a powerful red violet pigment. It'll make beautiful purples when you combine it with the phthalo blue, which the phthalo blue and this red makes terrible ones because this red leans slightly to the yellow side, this one leans slightly to the green side, and then you're going to get into a tertiary, what we call a tertiary color situation, and that's not really pretty. We'll talk about that. But it makes beautiful purples with the red violet, because the red violet color leans to the violet side of the spectrum, and it's very powerful, and it will help, really help and carry phthalo blue to make the beautiful, beautiful purples. But one of the things that is the most important about this pigment is that it is extremely cool. It is the coolest color, the coldest color that we have in our line here. So a lot of people think black's cold. Black's not. Black's more towards a neutral. Black is the absence of color, but the actual pigment, the PBK7 pigment that we use here, the pigment black 7, which is the chemical index name, is more of a neutral. It's not really, really cool. It's more neutral. It's, again, close to that tepid. So the red violet's a lot cooler. And if you look through a lot of older painting lessons, a lot of the masters, whenever they really wanted to cool something, even if they used a black or something like that, they would reach to the red-violet side of the wheel, which is really where you would find a lot of real cool colors. And they, back then they used a lot of lakes, a lot of alizarin crimsons or something like that to cool metals, to make shadow side of metals and shadows in things. There's a lot of the beautiful Dutch artists and artists of the Impressionists of the 19th and 20th century that would say you should not have a shadow unless it has a little alizarin crimson in it. We don't use alizarin crimson today because it's a very fugitive pigment, but it sits in the red-violet line, and red-violet here is very much like it. But this is totally a permanent pigment. You don't have to worry about any kind of it ever fading away like you do with the alizarin crimson. So it's the perfect choice for us to include in our palette, basically because it's going to make beautiful violets and it's cool. So anytime we make a shadow of anything, we're going to say add red violet, and you're going to hear that 100 times today as we go through this video. So I have 6 colors here. I have my 6 colors, and I have my color to make things darker. I have my color to make things lighter. I have my yellow, which will help us make basically all of our greens, all through our greens and our oranges. That's part of the spectrum. And then my 2 reds, which is my warm and my cool red, and then my phthalo blue, which is my mixing blue. And we'll learn how to put some of this on all of this together as we go through the lessons. Now, let's take a look at what is how we go about setting up our colors so that you really don't have to think about too much color theory if we set up our colors the way that we do in the Paint It Simply program. In the Paint It Simply program, we have a palette. And the actual palette comes to you, and it comes with a bunch of different things. This is called the Global Palette. The Global Palette has snap-on lids here. It goes like this, and it has an insert. And we have all kinds of videos that tells you how to use the Global Palette. This part of the insert here, in conjunction with a paper towel, can be used to set the colors up. Acrylic. This right here is going to be used for a watercolor, or it can be used for what we call the global colors. If you notice here on the palette, there is an X here in the palette. See this line, this X that's right here, okay, or cross that you have here. That lines up with this cross that's here that you see here, and then that locks the palette in place, okay? So you want to make sure that that logs up, but there's that cross that's right there. And then it has a lid that snaps on. It has a channel that goes right down in here, that this lid goes right down inside here, and then you snap the lid back in place, and then that keeps it pretty much airtight. But there is a large palette. There's a lot of air in there, so there are some cautions we say about saving your palette. How long can colors stay in this palette? For years. Okay, if you take care of them and if you understand your colors, which we're going to explain to you in this video, you can keep them in this thing here for years, okay? So that's not a concern. But we have 6 colors first we're going to set out, and then later on in the video we'll set out the 14, and I'll show you how to do it. First, let's go through how do you set up your palette. First, when you grab any one of the Paint It Simply programs, any one of the Paint It Simply lesson plans here, and you're going to see the word Paint It Simply somewhere on there. You're going to have all different kinds of things to it. This is a Paint It Simply packet, and it has 50-some step photos into the packet on how we're painting it, what we're doing with it. Okay, and then there's a whole section in the front, and this section, this is the 12 color set. This is your color wheel. This is your mixes that you're going to have here for setting out your colors and stuff. But this is the color theory section of it. And this color theory section that you have here in this particular part of the packet, let's just pull this out. In this particular part of the packet, this color theory section and the mixing of it here is basically always the same here. And a little bit of differences when you're dealing with the 12 and you're dealing with the 14 color set. So there'll be a little bit of differences. But basically what you want to have here is you read through your instructions that you have here. Then this is a very, very important wheel here. This is the actual global colors, the global palette. So you see, here's the cross that you have here, right here, crossing here and here. That's the global palette. So if you're going to set out your colors, what you do is you set out your global palette exactly the same way. So the cross is here, so they're out here like this. And then it tells you which there's a little compartment here on each one. So you know the naphtha red light will go here. You know you'll skip one here, then you'll put in the red violet here. And then you'll skip a couple of them down here, and you'll put the phthalo blue right down here. Hansa yellow goes right here. So you'll find that there's the cross right there, one below the cross and one below. That's where your Hansa yellow goes. And what I have done here already is I've set up a palette here, just started to set up a palette here with those colors. So these colors sit out here. Here's my Hansa yellow that sits here. Here's my black. Here's my white. Here is my red violet set out here, and my phthalo blue set out here. Exactly like you're going to see here in this particular palette. Now, why is this important to set up? Because what you're actually producing here is the color wheel. Okay, and the color wheel, now there's a lot of artists that will make really beautiful color wheels and they put yellow up at the top. That's not true. Yellow does not belong at the top. If you look at a rainbow, when God bends the rainbow with the water vapor that's in the air, what happens is you get red. It goes from red down through to your oranges, your yellows, your greens, your blues, and then to your violets at the last. It goes around in a clockwise around this way. And those are different degrees. Red sits at 0 degrees to the light, which means it sits at 0 degrees, it sits at the top. So the very top color up through here should be a red color. And that's why when we make a color wheel or something, we put red up there at the very top. And so if you look at a very basic, what we call a very basic color wheel, when you're putting one out, and I have one right here, what you have here is your red sits at the top. Opposite it here is going to be your greens, and then your blues and your yellow sitting over here. This is your triangle of your primaries. These are your primary colors here. So when you're going to set up this particular palette here, your red's going to be at the top, and your blues and your yellows are going to be down here, and your red's going to be right up there at the top, and sitting right here should be your red orange. Well, that's basically where your naphtha red light is going to be. That's your red orange, so it sits there. So the three of these this is just a little off here because we're not using a pure spectrum red. There's not really a pure spectrum red in color mixing that we have today. Not the same one that you'd find in the rainbow. So we have to kind of combine them. And we can make it, though. We can make it from our naphtha red light and our red violet, which we'll talk about. But so I'm going to set up my colors basically here as a color wheel. And if I mix a green, then my green will come right down here. I will take my blue and my yellow and I would mix it here. And then my reds would be here. If I mix an orange, my orange would be right in here. Okay, and so my red would be there. My red orange, basically, which is going to be my naphtha red light, it's going to sit there. So basically, I've got 12 spaces going around the outside of the wheel here. Those for the 12 color wheel. Okay, and so if you want to make, if I have a red here and an orange, and I know that my orange is made from red and yellow, all I have to do is just take this red, yellow, and this red and mix it together. You don't even have to think about it. You can just go grab it and do it. You don't have to think about it. You can keep it very, very simple. So if we set up our palette in a palette that already has color theory made into it, we don't need to know that much about color theory. That's the whole purpose of the Paint It Simply. So how do I set up my palette? Well, what I've done here as an example to begin with is I've gone in and I've squirt out my colors just like this, and I kind of fill up the well. One of the things that you want to do is you don't want to be timid about filling up these wells. Inside this lid here that you have, when I put this lid over the top of this, what happens is that there's still air in there, and if you have a lot of air in there, your paints are going to dry out. So you don't want to leave a big space of air between this, your paint and the top of the lid. So what you want to do is kind of fill it up. It's just like this. When you have a tube of paint and the paint tube's pretty full. It lasts for a long time. There's not a lot of air movement inside of this thing and it stays very nice. You want to create that same type of situation in here. So you don't want to put in just a drop of paint. You don't want to come in there and squirt in just a drop of paint and be very be very frugal with it, because that's actually going to make your paint dry faster. You want to kind of fill up the well a bit, give it a bit of paint here, and let's just take our naphtha red light. So our naphtha red light, according to our diagram that you'd find in any of the packets or anything there, find your X, here's your X, here's your X, here's your X. Naphtha red light belongs right here on the outside in that particular one right there. So I would take my naphtha red light, I grab it right here, and I will give a good squirt of it right down into the well there. Now, what you have right now is we're setting up the colors, and the colors here are what we call acrylic. Now, inside this tube, there's a little bit of what we call propylene glycol, which is your extender. That's the stuff that keeps the paint wet. There's also water. Water's inside of this thing, and then all of the chemicals and surfactants and emulsifiers that we have that make this the paint, and of course the pigment. So what we want to do, though, is start increasing. If you want to paint globally, if you want to paint what we call extended painting techniques, what you want to do is you want to take out some of the water and replace it with one of the mediums that we have in the line, which in Paint It Simply, we only use a couple of mediums. One of them that we use that's very important is extender medium. That's this one right here, the extender medium. And it's just a chemical called propylene glycol. This is basically, you eat this a lot. As a matter of fact, the other night I was eating some tortillas and I looked on the package of the tortillas, and it said right in there, propylene glycol. It had extender in them to keep them fresh and nice. We use a food grade propylene glycol. We get it from a food supplier. So this is all completely non-toxic, 100% safe. What you're going to have is a seal on there. I've already removed the seal on this one, so you want to make sure you remove the seal. And then what you want to do after you've put out your colors like this, what you want to do is you want to come through and you want to give a good squirt of extender into all of your colors here, okay? And a good squirt. And what I always say is, somewhere around 10-20% of extender in there to start it out. But what that's going to differ. Each color is a little different. It's like an oil. Oils, different oil colors dry at different things. When you start shifting these acrylics to an oil type of reaction, it's going to happen the same way. Certain colors are going to dry faster, and certain ones are going to need more extender than other colors and stuff like that. So you're going to need to vary that a little bit. Somewhere in 10-15%, up to 20% or so. But it will make the color a little bit thinner. Now what I do is I just mix this up. I just mix this up really, really well here like this. And then this is just ready to go. You can see it's all mixed up. It's at a good painting consistency right there. That little drink of extender will keep it there, and it'll be very nice. And then what I'll do is I just wipe off my little thing, and I go through, make sure you clean it off really well, or you'll tint some of your colors. But I will go ahead and mix this all up into all of them. And you can see it mixes very fast. A lot like some of the other acrylics out there, it doesn't mix fast. See how fast that mixed up in there? Mixed up very well, very even, very fast. And it does that because these colors already have the extender in it. So they mix up real fast. Now, what I do is I just leave the cover off of this for 8-10 hours or so, and what's going to happen is some of the water is going to start to dry out of this, and you might get a little film of it off there. You can go ahead and paint it right now with this. Matter of fact, the majority of the time I go ahead and paint right now just like this. You see me do it at conventions and demonstrations. The paint itself right now with that much extender mixed into it has about a 40-minute to an hour drying time. As the water comes out of this, as it sits during the day, water is going to evaporate out and extender is going to replace it, and then the drying time goes longer. And it can go all the way up to 30 hours on some of the real long ones that I have. So I like to keep mine right around 2 hours, 4 hours, and I do that just by adding more paint to it. Or you can add back more water to it if you want. But for the first day or two, what you ought to do is keep an eye on it if you're going to keep it open. Don't leave it out open all the time. Only you can leave it out open when you're painting with it. If you want to leave it out and let it dry up a little bit, and then a couple times, it takes a couple times a day for the first day to mix it up. You need to mix it up a couple of times. Otherwise, it'll get hard on the top, and then you don't want that. What you want to do is mix it down, because water slowly evaporates, and it'll, of course, evaporate off the top of it faster than the other part. So you want to make sure that you evaporate that. As you evaporate that, you're mixing it up. If it gets really too tight for you, too thick, starts to get, I like my paints like toothpaste, but if it starts to get too thick for you, then add more extender to it, and then that lengthens the drying time. If you think your paints are drying too slow for you, you can always add water back into it. So you physically go through and you mix these all up. When I'm done painting for the day, or if I'm not going to paint anymore, then I just take its lid and I snap its lid back up on top of this. Now, a good thing to do, though, is when you have this this lid like this, is there is still a lot of air movement here. And since I paint every day, that's not a problem. That little bit of air movement is going to keep it fine. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, that's fine. But if I'm going to go for, say, a longer than a week, I've mixed it up like this, and I'm not going to be able to paint for a week or so, then there's two things that I suggest you do. One is you can mist the top of your lid here with a little water bottle. Mist the top of it. That puts a little moisture, makes a humid environment inside of it for you. The other thing that I highly recommend, and this is what I always tell my students, is you get a little bit of this press and seal. And this is just a great little product. And what you do is you take the press and seal, you pull it out, pull out a good chunk of it here, and you tear that off, and then you just put this right over the top of your paints this way, and you press that down just like that. And what that does is that makes a completely airtight seal for that little chamber that's right there. And then if you just go ahead and put your lid back up on top of that right there and snap it back into place, now you know you're completely airtight, and that paint is not going to go anywhere to you. What you do, you've just created environment for it, just like inside the tube. So that will be just fine, okay? So, and you don't want to put it, though, in any sunlight or anything like that, or any place where it gets hot and cold real fast. And just keep it out of the sunlight, and then it'll be fine. And this will last forever. How long? It lasts for years. And if you take care of your paint, your palette, you can go for years and years and years. I'll show you one that I have over here. This is one that I know it looks horrible, but this is my favorite palette. I use this for everything. I've painted over 400 and some paintings with it. It's 2 years old, and you can even see my dirty extender down here. This is my painting palette, my production palette, and this has the original 6 colors. I'll set it up here like we're doing. This has the original 6 colors in here: my Naphtho red light, my red violet, my phthalo blue, my Hansa yellow, which has a little bit of this leaked into it. But you're using heavy pigmented colors here, so when this is this one here even has a little bit of that. I mix it up, I still have a beautiful Hansa yellow there. You're using, when you had bottled acrylics, you had to worry about, oh, I got a little bit of color in there, and I got to wash my brush. I got to clean my brush, because there's so little pigment in those bottled acrylics that a little bit of contamination of another color will we'll take it, we'll change the color. You don't have to worry about this. You're using an artist quality color now. The artist quality color has a lot of pigment in it, and it can absorb. See, it just absorbed that other and didn't change the color whatsoever. When my colors start to run a little bit low out of here, what I do is I just take a little bit more color, and you can see it's the same color that I'll just fill it up a little bit more. Sometimes I'll mix up some more extender into it, add a little bit more into it. So, if I add a little bit like that, then I'll just give it a little dose of some extender in there and mix this all up. And you can see it mixes real fast, but you whip it up real good. And now I've just helped filled up my container a little bit more. It's not quite as slow drying as it was just a few minutes ago, because I've added a little bit more water into it, right? But it's you probably won't even notice it. But as I get going, you'll see I'll have colors here or colors here like this one. See how thick this red violet is. I mean, it's just like a paste. It's very, very thick like a paste. This is how I really like, because this is very, very close to oils. This is really how I like to keep some of my colors. Especially, I like this very thick like this. I like it on my violets, and I like it on my whites. So my whites, even though my white looks dirty over here and I've dipped in a lot of stuff to it, my white is very thick also. See how very thick this thing is? It's very much like a toothpaste type thick. But see, even with that little color in there, I'll just mix it in like that, and I've got back to my white again. You can have little bits of contamination like this and mix that in. It won't make any difference whatsoever, because the colors that you're using here are so high quality. But look how thick this is. This is normally how I like to keep my whites and my violets, my blues and stuff, and my blues and my greens I like a little thinner. You can see this one's a little thinner, and my blues I like a little thinner. Over here I like it a little bit thinner in here. So some of my colors I like to keep. My oranges, since I don't really like a lot of orange, my orange I just keep almost like water here. Very, very, very thin. You can control your colors, the consistency of your color, by how much extender you add to it. So my reds and my oranges, I like them a little bit thinner than I do. I really like my whites and my violets really thick, especially the whites, because the white gives a lot of power. I love to paint white flowers. Is it important? No, you can make them all the same consistency, and that's okay. But you'll notice in a lot of the techniques where I come in and I chisel edge white, which I'll show you here as we go through this video, as I chisel into some of the whites and stuff, that chiseling, that little picking up at that edge is a lot easier if your whites are a little bit thicker. So how do you do that? Well, you just let it thicken up. And you can see I keep a couple containers with it here. And I can still add more to it, but more extender to it as I go. But when I put out the paint already, you can see the white comes out a little bit thicker than some of the colors. And I like the white very, very thick. But I just slowly start adding extender to this color. And the white will thicken up quite fast, because that's just the nature of its particular pigment, is it'll thicken up real fast. So this will keep this nice. This will be a good painting white here. And so I keep it a little bit thicker. But I have to watch it for the first couple of days, because it doesn't have as much extender into it. So it might dry up or get a little skin over it a little faster. And again, even if it gets a skin on top of it, don't take it off. Just put in some extender and mix it up. Okay, so if you want your colors a little thinner, like this one's a little thick right here. If you want your colors a little thinner, you just add a little bit of extender to them. You just come in and you just add a little more extender to them, and you mix that up. Okay, if you don't take care of your palette, here, it will dry up on you. So you should look at your palette a couple of times a week to make sure that, as you go through your palette and whip that up, take it off after a few days and whip those colors back up if you want to preserve it. If you're not going to be able to do that, make sure you put on the press and seal, and so that you can seal over it, and then they'll stay nicer to you. And if you're going to be a long time before you can go back to your palette, put an extra extender. Thin out your colors quite thin. Put an extra extender. Put on the palette press and seal. Say you can't paint for a month. You're going on vacation or something. Put on a little bit extra extender. Put on the press and seal. Close it up and set it away onto a shelf. And just forget about it. And it will be fine. It will be fine. It's all a matter of how your colors last. It's all a matter of you sealing away the air and keeping the extender into it. It's just like keeping them in a bottle here, okay? So you can do that. You can also keep them into other little containers as well. But once you get your palette the way you go, you can see I even got dirty colors and spills. This one has painted so many paintings for me. I know it doesn't look pretty, but it is a working palette. And what I have here is, like I said, my original 6, my Naphtha Red Light, my Hansa Yellow, my Phthalo, my Red Violet, and my black and my white. My white I moved out here. And one of the reasons why I moved out here, because these wells here are a little bit larger, and I like those larger wells. So these are, I move them out here just because I physically get more white. Sometimes I'll move it out over here. These other colors are the orange, the brown, the base toned yellow green, toned dark green, the blue, and there's a couple of other blues that you can mix up and another couple of reds that you can mix up. Those are in the palette and the instructions for you that you see here. If you look through your instructions, you'll see here they are the mixes, what we call the base colors, the base orange, base mist. We'll talk about those, mixing up those bases and stuff like that here in just a few minutes. But those are the bases that you have for mixing, and then you go through the second part of the mix, and we'll go through some of that in another section of the of this video in just a couple minutes. Okay, so what you have here is you're going to set up your palette, and you have a way to preserve your palette. Set up your colors, follow the X, put out your 6 colors, put out some extender into them, mix them all up here just like this. And then put on some press and seal on your palette top, or you can put your palette top and just use your palette top like I do. Sometimes I'll leave this one that's been out for so long, I sometimes will leave it uncovered for 2 or 3 days. But there's a lot of extender in it. There's very, very, very little water in these paints. And there's a lot of extender into it. And I just cover it up here like this, and I'll leave it for several days. As a matter of fact, I haven't touched this palette for 2 days, done anything with it, and as you see, everything is fine. So, but you've got to remember your colors have water in them at the first part. So for the first little bit, as you take water out, be careful with them, watch them, and then when you're done with them, make sure you cover them and take care of them, and you'll be able to use those colors for years. Okay. So what we're going to do is we'll go and I'll set up and we'll talk a little bit about mixing out the colors, and then later on in the video we'll talk about the advanced color palette. Okay, so you'll look for that. Go over to your little menu there, and we'll find what you want to do. If you want to watch the 14 color palette or the mixing of the palette or some of the examples of how we're painting through. Okay, I'll see you on the other sections of this DVD.